Donald John Trump was born on June 14, 1946, at Jamaica Hospital in the New York City borough of Queens, the fourth child of Fred Trump and Mary Ann McLeod Trump. He is of German and Scottish descent. He grew up with his older siblings, Mary Ann, Fred Jr., and Elizabeth, and his younger brother, Robert, in a mansion in the Jamaica Estates neighborhood of Queens. By age 8, he was a millionaire in 2024 dollars. Trump attended the private Kew Forest School through 7th grade. He was a difficult child and showed an early interest in his father's business. His father enrolled him in New York Military Academy, a private boarding school, to complete secondary school. Trump considered a show business career, but instead in 1960 enrolled at Fordham University. 2 years later, he transferred to the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, graduating in May 1968 with a Bachelor of Science in Economics. Real estate. Starting in 1968, Trump was employed at his father's real estate company, Trump Management, which owned racially segregated middle-class rental housing in New York City's outer boroughs. 1971. His father made him president of the company, and he began using the Trump Organization as an umbrella brand. Roy Cohn was Trump's fixer, lawyer, and mentor for 13 years in the 1970s and 1980s. In 1973, Cohn helped Trump countersue the U.S. government for $100 million, equivalent to $686 million in 2023, over its charges that Trump's properties had racial discriminatory practices. Trump's counterclaims were dismissed, and the government's case was settled with the Trumps signing a consent decree agreeing to desegregate. Helping Trump projects. Cohn was a consigliere heir whose mafia connections controlled construction unions. Cohn introduced political consultant Roger Stone to Trump, who enlisted Stone's services to deal with the federal government. Between 1991 and 2009, he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection for 6 of his businesses: the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan, the casinos in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and the Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts Company. In 1992, Trump, his siblings Mary Ann, Elizabeth, and Robert, and his cousin John W. Walter, each with a 20% share, formed Ole County Building Supply and Maintenance Corp. The company had no offices and is alleged to have been a shell company for paying the vendors providing services and supplies for Trump's rental units, then billing those services and supplies to Trump Management with markups of 20 to 50% and more. The owners shared the proceeds generated by the markups. The increased costs were used to get state approval for increasing the rents of his rent-stabilized units. Trump attracted public attention in 1978 with the launch of his family's first Manhattan venture, the renovation of the derelict Commodore Hotel, adjacent to Grand Central Terminal. The financing was facilitated by a $400 million city property tax abatement arranged for him by his father, who also, jointly with Hyatt, guaranteed a $70 million bank construction loan. The hotel reopened in 1980 as the Grand Hyatt Hotel, and that same year he obtained rights to develop Trump Tower, a mixed-use skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. The building houses the headquarters of the Trump Corporation and Trump's PAC and was his primary residence until 2019. In 1988, Trump acquired the Plaza Hotel with a loan from a consortium of 16 banks. The hotel filed for bankruptcy protection in 1992, and a reorganization plan was approved a month later, with the banks taking control of the property.
In 1995, he defaulted on over $3 billion of bank loans, and the lenders seized the Plaza Hotel along with most of his other properties in a vast and humiliating restructuring that allowed him to avoid personal bankruptcy. The lead bank's attorney said of the bank's decision that they all agreed that he'd be better alive than dead. In 1996, Trump acquired and renovated the mostly vacant 71-story skyscraper at 40 Wall Street, later rebranded as the Trump Building. In the early 1990s, he won the right to develop a 70-acre, 28 hectares, tract in the Lincoln Square neighborhood near the Hudson River. Struggling with debt from other ventures in 1994, he sold most of his interest in the project to Asian investors, who financed the project's completion. Riverside South. Trump's last major construction project was the 92-story mixed-use Trump International Hotel and Tower in Chicago, which opened in 2008. In 2024, the New York Times and ProPublica reported that the Internal Revenue Service was investigating whether he had twice written off losses incurred through construction cost overruns and lagging sales of residential units in the building he had declared to be worthless on his 2008 tax return.
In 1984, Trump opened Harrah's at Trump Plaza, a hotel and casino with financing and management help from the Holiday Corporation. It was unprofitable, and he paid Holiday $70 million in May 1986 to take sole control. In 1985, he bought the unopened Atlantic City Hilton Hotel and renamed it Trump Castle. Both casinos filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in 1992. Trump bought a third Atlantic City venue in 1988, the Trump Taj Mahal. It was financed with $675 million in junk bonds and completed for $1.1 billion. Opening in April 1990, he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in 1991 under the provisions of the restructuring agreement. He gave up half his initial stake and personally guaranteed future performance. To reduce his $900 million of personal debt, he sold the Trump Shuttle airline. His mega yacht, the Trump Princess, which had been leased to his casinos and kept docked, and other businesses. In 1995, Trump founded Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts (THCR), which assumed ownership of the Trump Plaza. THCR purchased the Taj Mahal and the Trump Castle in 1996 and went bankrupt in 2004 and 2009, leaving him with 10% ownership. He remained chairman until 2009.
He continued to use a wing of the house as a private residence. He declared the club his primary residence in 2019. He began building and buying golf courses in 1999, owning 17 golf courses by 2016. The Trump Organization has licensed the Trump name for consumer products and services, including foodstuffs, apparel, learning courses, and home furnishings. According to The Washington Post, there are more than 50 licensing or management deals involving his name, and they have generated at least $59 million for his companies. By 2018, only 2 consumer goods companies continued to license his name. In 1970, Trump invested $70,000 to receive billing as co-producer of a Broadway comedy. In September 1983, he purchased the New Jersey Generals, a team in the United States Football League. After the 1985 season, the league folded, largely due to his attempt to move to a fall schedule. when it would have competed with the National Football League, NFL, for audience, and trying to force a merger with the NFL by bringing in antitrust suit. Trump and his Plaza Hotel hosted several boxing matches at the Atlantic City Convention Hall. In 1989 and 1990, he lent his name to the Tour de Trump cycling stage race, an attempt to create an American equivalent of European races such as the Tour de France or the Giro d'Italia. From 1986 to 1988, he purchased significant blocks of shares in various public companies while suggesting that he intended to take over the company and then sold his shares for a profit, leading some observers to think he was engaged in greenmail. The New York Times found that he initially made millions of dollars in such stock transactions, but lost most, if not all, of those gains after investors stopped taking his takeover talk seriously. In 1988, Trump purchased the Eastern Airlines shuttle, financing the purchase with $380 million, equivalent to $979 million in 2023, in loans from a syndicate of 22 banks. He renamed the airline Trump Shuttle and operated it until 1992. He defaulted on his loans in 1991, and ownership passed to the banks. In 1996, he purchased the Miss Universe pageants, including Miss USA and Miss Teen USA. Due to disagreements with CBS about scheduling, he took both pageants to NBC in 2002. In 2007, he received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for his work as producer of Miss Universe. NBC and Univision dropped the pageants in June 2015 in reaction to his comments about Mexican immigrants. In 2005, Trump co-founded Trump University, a company that sold real estate seminars for up to $35,000. After New York state authorities notified the company that its use of university violated state law, as it was not an academic institution, its name was changed to the Trump Entrepreneur Initiative in 2010. In 2013, the state of New York filed a $40 million civil suit against Trump University, alleging that the company made false statements and defrauded consumers. Additionally, 2 class actions were filed in federal court against Trump and his companies. Internal documents revealed that employees were instructed to use a hard sell approach, and former employees testified that Trump University had defrauded or lied to its students. Shortly after he won the 2016 presidential election, he agreed to pay a total of $25 million to settle the 3 cases. Foundation. The Donald J. Trump Foundation was a private foundation established in 1988. From 1987 to 2006, Trump gave his foundation $5.4 million, which had been spent by the end of 2006. After donating a total of $65,000 in 2007 to 2008, he stopped donating any personal funds to the charity, which received millions from other donors, including $5 million from Vince McMahon. The foundation gave to health and sports-related charities, conservative groups, and charities that held events at Trump properties. In 2016, The Washington Post reported that the charity committed several potential legal and ethical violations, including alleged self-dealing and possible tax evasion. Also in 2016, the New York Attorney General determined the foundation to be in violation of state law for soliciting donations without submitting to required annual external audits, and ordered it to cease its fundraising activities in New York immediately. Trump's team announced in December 2016 that the foundation would be dissolved. In June 2018, the New York Attorney General's office filed a civil suit against the foundation, Trump, and his adult children, seeking $2.8 million in restitution and additional penalties. In December 2018, the foundation ceased operation and dispersed its assets to other charities. In November 2019, a New York state judge ordered Trump to pay $2 million to a group of charities for misusing the foundation's funds, in part to finance his presidential campaign, legal affairs and bankruptcies. According to a review of state and federal court files conducted by USA Today in 2018, Trump and his businesses had been involved in more than 4,000 state and federal legal actions. While he has not filed for personal bankruptcy, his over-leveraged hotel and casino businesses in Atlantic City and New York filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection 6 times between 1991 and 2009. They continued to operate while the banks restructured debt and reduced his shares in the properties. During the 1980s, more than 70 banks had lent Trump $4 billion. After his corporate bankruptcies of the early 1990s, most major banks, with the exception of Deutsche Bank, declined to lend to him. After the January 6 Capitol attack, the bank decided not to do business with him or his company in the future. Trump has often said he began his career with a small loan of $1 million from his father and that he had to pay it back with interest. He borrowed at least $60 million from his father, largely did not repay the loans, and received another $413 million, 2018 equivalent, adjusted for inflation, from his father's company. Posing as a Trump Organization official named John Barron, Trump called journalist Jonathan Greenberg in 1984, trying to get a higher ranking on the Forbes 400 list of wealthy Americans. Trump self-reported his net worth over a wide range, from a low of -$900 million in 1990 to a high of $10 billion in 2015. In 2024, Forbes estimated his net worth at $2.3 billion and ranked him the 1,438th wealthiest person in the world. Trump registered as a Republican in 1987, a member of the Independence Party, the New York State affiliate of the Reform Party, in 1999, a Democrat in 2001, a Republican in 2009, unaffiliated in 2011, and a Republican in 2012. In 1987, Trump placed full-page advertisements in 3 major newspapers, expressing his views on foreign policy and how to eliminate the federal budget deficit. In 1988, he approached Lee Atwater, asking to be put into consideration to be Republican nominee George H.W. Bush's running mate. Bush found the request strange and unbelievable. Trump was a candidate in the 2000 Reform Party presidential primaries for 3 months, but withdrew from the race in February 2000. In 2011, Trump speculated about running against President Barack Obama in the 2012 election, making his first speaking appearance at the Conservative Political Action Conference, PAC, in February and giving speeches in early primary states. In May 2011, he announced he would not run. Trump announced his candidacy in June 2015. He became the front-runner in March 2016 and was declared the presumptive Republican nominee in May. His campaign statements were often opaque and suggestive, and a record number were false. He was highly critical of media coverage and frequently made claims of media bias. Hillary Clinton led Trump in national polling averages throughout the campaign, but, in early July, her lead narrowed. In mid-July he selected Indiana Governor Mike Pence as his running mate, and the two were officially nominated at the 2016 Republican National Convention. Trump described NATO as obsolete and espoused views that were described as non-interventionist and protectionist. His campaign platform emphasized renegotiating U.S.-China relations and free trade agreements such as NAFTA and strongly enforcing immigration laws. Other campaign positions included pursuing energy independence while opposing climate change regulations, modernizing services for veterans, repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act, abolishing Common Core education standards, investing in infrastructure, simplifying the tax code while reducing taxes, and imposing tariffs on imports by companies that offshore jobs. He advocated increasing military spending and extreme vetting or banning of immigrants from Muslim-majority countries. Trump's proposed immigration policies were a topic of bitter debate during the 2016 campaign. He promised to build a wall on the Mexico-US border to restrict illegal movement and vowed that Mexico would pay for it. He pledged to deport millions of illegal immigrants residing in the U.S., and criticized birthright citizenship for incentivizing anchor babies. According to an analysis in Political Science Quarterly, Trump made explicitly racist appeals to whites during his 2016 presidential campaign. In particular, his campaign launch speech drew criticism for claiming Mexican immigrants were bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. In response, NBC fired him from Celebrity Apprentice. Trump's FEC required reports listed assets above $1.4 billion and outstanding debts of at least $315 million. He did not release his tax returns, contrary to the practice of every major candidate since 1976 and his promises in 2014 and 2015 to do so if he ran for office. He said his tax returns were being audited, and that his lawyers had advised him against releasing them. After a lengthy court battle to block release of his tax returns and other records to the Manhattan District Attorney for a criminal investigation, including 2 appeals by Trump to the U.S. Supreme Court, in February 2021 the High Court allowed the records to be released to the prosecutor for review by a grand jury. In October 2016, portions of Trump's state filings for 1995 were leaked to a reporter from the New York Times. They show that he had declared a loss of $916 million that year, which could have let him avoid taxes for up to 18 years. On November 8, 2016, Trump received 306 pledged electoral votes versus 232 for Clinton, although, after elector defections on both sides, the official count was ultimately 304 to 227. The 5th person to be elected president while losing the popular vote, he received nearly 2.9 million fewer votes than Clinton, 46.3% to her 48.25%. He was the only president who neither served in the military nor held any government office prior to becoming president. Trump won 30 states, including Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, states which had been considered a blue wall of Democratic strongholds since the 1990s. His victory marked the return of an undivided Republican government, a Republican president combined with Republican control of both chambers of Congress. Trump's victory sparked protests in major U.S. cities. Trump was inaugurated on January 20, 2017. The day after his inauguration, an estimated 2.6 million people worldwide, including 500,000 in Washington, D.C., protested against him in the women's marches. During his first week in office, Trump signed 6 executive orders, including authorizing procedures for repealing the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations, advancement of the Keystone XL and Dakota Access Pipeline projects, and planning for a wall along the U.S. border with Mexico. Trump's daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner became his assistant and senior advisor, respectively. Before being inaugurated, Trump moved his businesses into a revocable trust, rather than a blind trust or equivalent arrangement, to cleanly sever himself from his business interests. He continued to profit from his businesses and knew how his administration's policies affected them. Although he said he would eschew new foreign deals, the Trump Organization pursued operational expansions in Scotland, Dubai, and the Dominican Republic. Lobbyists, foreign government officials, and Trump donors and allies generated hundreds of millions of dollars for his resorts and hotels. Trump was sued for violating the domestic and foreign emoluments clauses of the U.S. Constitution, the first time that the clauses had been substantively litigated. One case was dismissed in lower court, 152, two were dismissed by the U.S. Supreme Court as moot after his term. Trump took office at the height of the longest economic expansion in American history, which began in 2009 and continued until February 2020, when the COVID-19 recession began. In December 2017, Trump signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. It reduced tax rates for businesses and individuals and set the penalty associated with the Affordable Care Act's individual mandate to $0. The Trump administration claimed that the act would not decrease government revenue, but 2018 revenues were 7.6% lower than projected. Under Trump, the federal budget deficit increased by almost 50% to nearly $1 trillion in 2019. By the end of his term, the U.S. national debt increased by 39%, reaching $27.75 trillion, and the U.S. debt-to-GDP ratio hit a post-World War II high. Trump also failed to deliver the $1 trillion infrastructure spending plan on which he had campaigned. Trump is the only modern U.S. president to leave office with a smaller workforce than when he took office, by 3 million people. Trump rejects the scientific consensus on climate change. He reduced the budget for renewable energy research by 40% and reversed Obama-era policies directed at curbing climate change. He withdrew from the Paris Agreement, making the U.S. the only nation to not ratify it. Trump aimed to boost the production and exports of fossil fuels. Natural gas expanded under Trump, but coal continued to decline. He rolled back more than 100 federal environmental regulations, including those that curbed greenhouse gas emissions, air and water pollution, and the use of toxic substances. He weakened protections for animals and environmental standards for federal infrastructure projects, and expanded permitted areas for drilling and resource extraction, such as allowing drilling in the Arctic Refuge. The Institute for Policy Integrity found that 78% of his proposals were blocked by courts or did not prevail over litigation. During his campaign, Trump vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. In office, he scaled back the act's implementation through executive orders. He expressed a desire to let Obamacare fail, his administration have the enrollment period and drastically reduced funding for enrollment promotion. In June 2018, the Trump administration joined 18 Republican-led states in arguing before the Supreme Court that the elimination of the financial penalties associated with the individual mandate had rendered the act unconstitutional. Their pleading would have eliminated health insurance coverage for up to 23 million Americans, but was unsuccessful. During the 2016 campaign, Trump promised to protect funding for Medicare and other social safety net programs. In January 2020, he expressed willingness to consider cuts to them. In response to the opioid epidemic, Trump signed legislation in 2018 to increase funding for drug treatments, but was widely criticized for failing to make a concrete strategy. Trump barred organizations that provide abortions or abortion referrals from receiving federal funds. He said he supported traditional marriage, but considered the nationwide legality of same-sex marriage settled. His administration rolled back key components of the Obama administration's workplace protections against discrimination of LGBTQ people. His attempted rollback of anti-discrimination protections for transgender patients in August 2020 was halted by a federal judge after a Supreme Court ruling extended employees' civil rights protections to gender identity and sexual orientation. Trump has said he is opposed to gun control, although his views have shifted over time. His administration took an anti-marijuana position, revoking Obama-era policies that provided protections for states that legalized marijuana. Trump is a longtime advocate of capital punishment, and his administration oversaw the federal government execute 13 prisoners, more than in the previous 56 years combined, ending his 17-year moratorium. In 2016, He said he supported the use of interrogation torture methods such as waterboarding. As president, Trump described illegal immigration as an invasion of the United States and drastically escalated immigration enforcement. He implemented harsh policies against asylum seekers and deployed nearly 6,000 troops to the U.S. Mexico border to stop illegal crossings. He reduced the number of refugees admitted to record lows, from an annual limit of 110,000 before he took office to 15,000 in 2021. Trump also increased restrictions on granting permanent residency to immigrants needing public benefits. One of Trump's central campaign promises was to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. During his first term, the U.S. built 73 miles, 117 kilometers of wall in areas without barriers and 365 miles, 587 kilometers, to replace older barriers. In 2018, Trump's refusal to sign any congressional spending bill unless it allocated funding for the border wall resulted in the longest ever federal government shutdown, for 35 days from December 2018 to January 2019. The shutdown ended after Trump agreed to fund the government without any funds for the wall. To avoid another shutdown, Congress passed a funding bill with $1.4 billion for border fencing in February. Trump later declared a national emergency on the southern border to divert $6.1 billion of funding to the border wall despite congressional disagreement. In January 2017, Trump signed an executive order that temporarily denied entry to citizens of 7 Muslim-majority countries. The order caused many protests and legal challenges that resulted in nationwide injunctions. A revised order giving some exceptions was also blocked by courts, but the Supreme Court ruled in June that the ban could be enforced on those lacking a bona fide relationship with a person or entity in the U.S. Trump replaced the ban in September with a presidential proclamation extending travel bans to North Koreans, Chadians, and some Venezuelan officials, but excluded Iraq and Sudan. The Supreme Court allowed that version to go into effect in December 2017, and ultimately upheld the ban in 2019. From 2017 to 2018, the Trump administration had a policy of family separation that separated over 4,400 children of migrant families from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border. An unprecedented policy sparked public outrage in the country. Despite Trump initially blaming Democrats and insisting he could not stop the policy with an executive order, he acceded to public pressure in June 2018 and mandated that migrant families be detained together unless there is a concern of risk for the child. A judge later ordered that the families be reunited and further separations stopped except in limited circumstances, though over 1,000 additional children were separated from their families after the order.